Wisconsin running back Braelon Allen is the perfect post-hype sleeper in your dynasty leagues. We'll discuss his tape, his analytic profile, and of course, his dynasty value on this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Madjuk. You can follow her on Twitter at Kate Madjuk. It's officially draft week. We've made it. We are here. We are still previewing players getting ready for the draft. And today we're looking at Wisconsin running back Braelon Allen, who is a little bit of a mystery, at least to me. Kate, what did you see from Allen just on the tape?
Let's talk about the basics of Braelon Allen because I think at first glance, there's so much to like here. He is a 6'1", 235-pound running back who just turned 20 years old in January, literally the youngest running back in this draft class and player in this draft class, period. 3-year player out of Wisconsin, started primarily out each of the last 3 seasons, but had a productive run in every one of his 3 seasons at Wisconsin. He's got build-up frame. He's got the most imposing frame out of any of these top running backs here in this class. But best season that he had actually came as a true freshman out of Wisconsin. Averaged 6.8 yards per carry, just under 1,300 rushing yards, 12 touchdowns, but consistent production over each of the past 3 seasons. Now, I think people are cooling a little bit on Braelon Allen after he spent, how many years atop the top Devy running backs for a million years here. I think they cooled on him because we saw a little bit of drop in efficiency over the last 2 seasons, posted a career low 984 yards, 12 touchdowns this past season. But Marcus, I want to share the caveat that this is actually in a season where Braelon Allen was a little banged up. But here's the plus, right? He's got the size. He's got 3 years of very productive, productive seasons coming out of Wisconsin in the Big Ten. He's the youngest player in this draft class, which I think also lends itself to the fact that he's still being molded. He was actually recruited as a linebacker coming out of college, signed with Wisconsin as a safety, and ended up transitioning to running back as a true freshman just based on needs in the depth chart. They forced him into that position. And again, let me remind you, being forced into that running back position as a true freshman, just under 1,300 rushing yards and 12 touchdowns. That's pretty impressive because I'm pretty sure Braelon Allen was 17 years old at the time. And
yes, he was
dominated as a true freshman. There's a lot to like about Braelon Allen.
There is a lot to like about him. I mean, you just don't see very many 6'1", 245-pound running backs with his speed. He is a height, weight, speed monster. My biggest issue with Braelon Allen is you see all these awesome parts and you add them together and it leaves you wanting a little bit more at the running back position. I know it's not fair to compare players to Derrick Henry, but I so wanted him to be I wanted him to be like Derrick Henry because physically he kind of looks like him, except for if you saw a picture of Derrick Henry and Braelon Allen working out. It was comical how much bigger Derrick Henry is than him right now. But you're talking about a 20-year-old who's still growing into his body, who was atop the freaks list by Bruce Fieldman. There's so much to like about his game, but every time I watch him, I'm like, I just don't know how this is going to work in the NFL. I'm not saying that he's not going to be a NFL caliber running back. I do wonder what the upside is here, because I see somebody, Kate, that, and please tell me if you disagree, that like his overall quickness is kind of lacking. And despite him being a really good athlete, it takes him a little bit of a while to get going. And the problem is against NFL defenses that swarm you, like, is this just going to lead to a lot of,
Stuff runs.
stuff runs and 1 and 2 yard gains that could potentially be 7 and 8 yard gains? Like, I'm trying to figure out, is he closer to Derrick Henry or is he closer to AJ Dillon?
I think all of those are pretty fair questions. But Marcus, I also want to point out the fact that like Derrick Henry coming out, in his draft class was 22 years old. So that's a full 2 years older than Braelon Allen. Like if this is him kind of growing into his body, just turning 20 years old, I think there's so much here left in the tank. And I'm going to be totally honest. When you look at the physical traits, I think he's a much better athlete than sometimes you see on tape. I think for his size doesn't always play to the level of power that you might expect for like a quote unquote power back. But I do think that there's still a level of shiftiness. I like his footwork, generally speaking, not as consistent as you might hope for a third year player. But again, the youth has me keep going back for more, that I think there's a lot of untapped potential here. Let's talk about his strengths. And we've touched on these briefly, but what are your favorite parts of Braelon Allen's game, despite your level of hesitancy?
Once he gets downhill, he is a menace. And I don't necessarily think he's the most powerful back. Like, I don't think he's somebody like, he's not Jerome Bettis. However, once he gets a full head of steam, like, it's really, really hard for tacklers to bring him down, especially like linebackers and safeties, because they just don't have the size to bring him down. And he's such a big athlete. I do think he has some power to his game. I think his lower body is really strong. And one of the things I want to give him a lot of credit for is one of the knocks early on in his career was that he just wasn't much of a pass catcher. I think his first year in college, he had 8 catches. By 2023, 28 catches, and that's not a ton. And the overall yardage wasn't amazing, but he got better. And I think that's one of the things that I do like about Braelon Allen is you could see these little parts of his game getting better the more he played. He got better as a pass blocker. He got better as a receiver. I think he got better in the short yardage stuff. So I do think he is an ascending player. I'm just curious to see like what the final version of this player looks like.
Yeah, in terms of his knocks, maybe like we said, doesn't always play with as much power as you would guess for the
No.
size component of his game. He's not overly quick, but like he's not stuck in sand either. Like it's just these kind of things that like probably has as much quickness as I would expect for a long, thick built running back. Now, probably the biggest issue for me, generally speaking, is the fumbling issues.
That is
4
the issue.
fumbles on 209 touches in 2023. You gotta have that element of ball security. And that is probably going to be one of the biggest weaknesses that teams are going to see coming out of the draft. Also, despite the fact that, like, I'm going to say it, he was not the most efficient pass blocker in this class. Had some weaknesses there. Actually led all running backs in this past season in pressures allowed in pass protection. 15 pressures given up in 2023. But on the flip side, Marcus, again, pretty young and has more experience in pass protection than a lot of other top, running backs considered among the top dynasty assets in this class.
Yeah, and really quickly, going back to the power thing, from what we know, it sounds like he played around 250 pounds at Wisconsin. And he has power, but he's not just somebody that's going to run over linebackers consistently. It's kind of like the way I view Le'Veon Bell. When Le'Veon Bell was coming out of Michigan State, he was 240 pounds, but he played more like a running back that was 215 pounds. You would occasionally see the power. And actually, Le'Veon Bell cut a bunch of weight once he got in the NFL, and it started to suit his body a little bit more.
Yes.
I wonder if Braelon Allen is trying to do that a little bit. And that's the reason why we didn't get any testing numbers from him. Everybody told us how great of an athlete he was. Didn't do anything at the combine, didn't do anything at the pro day, measured in at 235 pounds. If I had to guess, Kate, my guess is he's trying to cut some weight to be a little bit quicker. So rather than playing at 250, he's going to try to play at 230 during his rookie season.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair assessment. You know, we got the measurables at the combine, 95th percentile in height and weight, but as you mentioned, didn't get that 40-yard dash. He actually came out on social media and said, you know, he didn't really feel like he had time to train for the 40-yard dash. He was dealing with a bit of an ankle injury. I have kind of similar assumptions to you with that variability in you know, what he was playing at Wisconsin and dropping to 235 pounds. Maybe that changes things a little bit. You know, didn't necessarily shine in the vertical and broad jump. Sub 40 percentile in both of those for the running back position. Did do the bench press though, 26
Heck
reps
yeah.
on that bench press. Had to show off there.
Yeah. So that just a theory. I think he's cutting weight to try to be a little bit more explosive than the NFL. And I totally understand.
I think that would suit him though.
Yeah,
I do think that would suit him.
Let's dive into the advanced analytics here with Braelon Allen because his stable numbers are not great on PFF. We will dive into that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA and the NHL. We've got baseball in full swing. We've got the NFL draft, which you can now wager on thanks to FanDuel. And FanDuel is your place to bet on every single game. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all in an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. I can't wait for the NFL draft because we're also going to have NHL playoff games and NBA playoff games going on at the same time. I've got 3 TVs in my basement. They're going to all be just loaded with sports. It's an amazing time of the year. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and make your first bet an automatic win with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. This episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I've been told that I'm a competitive person, and my competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it before. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great twist on Monopoly where you play on not just one board, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. But the best part is messing with my friends. I can charge them rent on iconic properties just like in classic Monopoly. Plus, I can also heist their vaults of riches for myself. And the leaderboards show me who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is. But it's not just my competitive side that loves it. You can team up with friends and people all around the world in time tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get in the game, join your friends, download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We want to let you know that the Locked On NFL Mock Draft Show is available now. Find the ultimate 6-episode series on Locked On NFL Draft to hear who the local Locked On experts are picking for every NFL franchise, with live reactions from local college football experts and even the fantasy football angle. The Locked On NFL Mock Draft Show is available now on Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Okay, let's dive into the analytic profile of Braelon Allen. What do we got?
Not probably as consistent, you know, production here in the advanced metrics as you might have hoped. So I went all the way back to 2021. Over the past 3 seasons, Braelon Allen posted a 65th percentile PFF rushing grade, did rank 74th and 76th percentiles in missed forced tackles per attempt and yards after contact per attempt, respectively. Not necessarily a huge surprise given that size and power component. Didn't really pop off the page as a receiver. 8th percentile for PFF receiving grade, 15th percentile in yards per route run. And you kind of saw that in terms of his overall efficiency as a receiver. But again, these metrics date back to 2021. I wanted to get a full profile of his 3 seasons at Wisconsin, because as I mentioned, like didn't necessarily start every game as a true freshman, but still posted one of his best seasons as a pure rusher in that true freshman season. Again, coming back to the fumbling rate over his past 3 seasons, 16th percentile in terms of his fumbling rate. And that wasn't an issue that necessarily cleared up. He had 4 fumbles here in the 2023 season. So still something that he very much needs to work on here at the next level. But even despite this very poor profile as a receiving back, again, I mentioned some of the struggles in pass protection here. I think what we still saw was some year-over-year growth, which I think is important into understanding his overall trajectory, given how young he is and relatively inexperienced he is at the running back position after making that positional change from defense to primarily being on offense. I'm not overly terrified, even though this isn't the prettiest of analytical profiles that we're going to find here in this class.
What's the one that's the most concerning to you?
Probably got to be the fumble rate, to be honest. And that is something that can be coached. So that I even struggle with that, right? I don't think he's going to be necessarily, we talked about kind of the comparison in the way that Le'Veon Bell cut weight. I don't think he's actually, he's never going to be the receiver that Lev Bell is. So I don't necessarily see that as the pinnacle of his game. He is going to be more of a power back type. So I'm not necessarily overly concerned about the inefficiency as a receiver. Yeah. I'm not, again, I'm just not overly concerned about his analytical profile, even though it's not a glowing one. Can you share some insight? Because I think you're more concerned than I am.
There's one stat that I saw. This comes from PFF, and we've actually referenced it a few times now. Is the percentage of your rushes into a heavy box and then your yards per carry. One of the reasons, spoiler, that we like Audric Estime so much is he had almost 80% of his carries against the loaded box and still averaged 6.5 yards per attempt. Braelon Allen saw a much lower percentage, right around 45%, but he was averaging under 4 yards per carry. Now, a lot of that is due to Wisconsin using more shotgun this year. I just don't think Braelon Allen is a shotgun runner where he's lined up next to the quarterback. I think you want him behind the quarterback in a I formation or single back running downhill, like in a wide zone offense. My biggest concern is if he's on a team that has a less than ideal offensive line, is he going to be quick enough to avoid defenders in the backfield and churn out those 2 to 3, 4 yard runs? I'm not sure. It makes me a little bit nervous. However, I keep coming back to the age, and it's a really, really fair point. He is 20 years old. There's running backs in this class that are significantly older than him that just have a lot more experience. I think a perfect example is like a Ray Davis, who's going to be 25 during his rookie season. Marshawn Lloyd is going to be 24 during his rookie season. Blake Corum, who we're going to talk about on tomorrow's show, is going to be 24. What does Braelon Allen look like 2 years from now when he gets a little bit more experience, when he plays more of the position? I just don't know, and that's why he is so intriguing to me.
Well, and let's just say, like, for a guy coming out with 597 career touches, which is, on the higher side compared to
it is
some of the other running backs in this class, I still think that, like, quote unquote, he's one of the least experienced, because we really, like, there's still so much time that to kind of figure out where he's really going to go. Like Ray Davis, I think we know who Ray Davis is as a running back. Audric Estime, I think we know who Audric Estime is. We know who Blake Corum is. Like,
good player.
Braelon Allen is a guy that both has, I think, some pretty solid tape, advanced metrics kind of all over the board, but has a breadth of experience that I think still has me questioning, like, how much more is there? Because I don't think we know exactly who he is as a player yet. And I think there's still, a lot of room for growth. Whereas I think Ray Davis is the guy that Ray Davis is
Yeah,
coming out.
probably. Yeah. I
Um,
mean, I think he's pretty maxed out at this point. I
yes,
want to
I
ask
do
you,
not think Braelon Allen is maxed out. That's my point.
we talk about fit with the running backs a lot. You and I are pretty high on Jonathan Brooks, regardless of fit. Obviously, we've talked about last week. We think if he lands in a couple situations, he could be a top 5 or 6 dynasty running back right away. But for the most part, we think he's a very good running back. Same with Trey Benson. How much is the fit going to matter with Braelon Allen in terms of his dynasty value, which we'll get to further in a second? But do you think he's a little bit more dependent on landing spot?
I'm kind of in between on him. Like Jalen Wright is the guy that I think landing spot's going to be huge. I don't really care about landing spot as much for Jonathan Brooks. I'm probably right here, smack dab in between with Braelon
Yep.
Allen. I want to see him in a situation where he can grow into a role, but I also think like comparatively against a guy like Jalen Wright, much more pro ready than um, maybe you would guess. I don't care as much about the landing spot, though I hope he lands in a position where he can assume a lead back role sooner rather than later.
All right, let's discuss his dynasty value, where he ranks among rookie running backs, and then my favorite part of the show. Every time we do this, NFL comps. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch, with killer last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. I love Game Time. It's what I use whenever I want to go to Penguins games or Pirates games. You could save up to 60% off buying last minutes for sports, concerts, comedy, theater events near you, and save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or the event. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem promo code LOCKDOWNNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We are discussing Wisconsin running back Braelon Allen. Kate, where is he currently being drafted among Dynasty rookie running backs?
Too low is what I have to say. RB6 right now. So that ranks behind Jonathan Brooks, Trey Benson, Jalen Wright, Marshawn Lloyd, Blake Corum, and then we have Braelon Allen here at 6, which I think, I'm going to be honest, based on, I think, what he still has left in the tank in terms of figuring out his overall evaluation and his overall ceiling. If Braelon Allen falls to me at RB6 in my rookie drafts, I'm going to be screaming hallelujah and running through the streets with a trumpet. I don't know. Like, I'm going to go bananas because I think that evaluation of Braelon Allen is a little bit bonkers in terms of his overall value as a rookie here and the potential ceiling that he has given the build. Like, if he comes out as a AJ Dillon, right, who I don't necessarily, I think is a fair comp, but like if his floor is an AJ Dillon, I'd still consider that a huge win at RB6, but I think his ceiling is a bit higher than what we've seen from AJ Dillon here in the pros so far.
Yeah, I would just much rather have him than Marshawn Lloyd. I just think he's a better player. The comp that I have for him is Ramondre Stevenson for the New England Patriots. Now, Ramondre has dealt with some injuries, but whenever Ramondre has been healthy, that's been a very good NFL running back, and he's been pretty good for fantasy as well. Now, the Patriots have always been notorious for their backfield situation and how they divvy up carries. So I think Ramondre maybe in a different situation would have had more dynasty value, but that's the player that he reminds me of, like somebody who good between the tackles. If you can get him in space, he's a much, much better athlete than you anticipate. They've got some size on him. I like Braelon Allen. I'm still holding out hope that we see like the 2021 version of him where he was absolutely dominant. Maybe he'll get that on the right team. Maybe he gets healthier. Maybe he cuts some weight and looks a little bit quicker. I like him where he's being projected and where he's being valued. And I can see the upside in the case for him to be even better than that.
Yeah, I do think that injuries have probably, been a factor. For from Dane Brugler's The Beast draft guide, missed a game as a freshman due to a concussion, dealt with shoulder and a leg injury as a sophomore, then had a ankle injury that kind of plagued him throughout the end of his final season at Wisconsin. So definitely, like, his freshman season was absolutely his healthiest season overall. So maybe health probably played, and I would be willing to guess that health played a bigger factor, and maybe some of that um lack of growth in terms of efficiency. But again, just so much room to grow. And then let's talk about his overall
Mhm.
value here, because maybe that's where he's looking like the biggest value overall. RB 38 right now in
Wild.
dynasty startup leagues, which is absolutely disrespectful.
Can you give
Being
us some running
drafted
backs that are being ahead of him right now?
just ahead of him, we have RB 37, Austin Eckler, who is 28 years old and just got a very disappointing contract with the Washington Commanders. Going behind guys like James Conner entering his age 28 season, Brian Robinson, who I think is kind of an interesting case study in terms of value right now, but
Can,
25 years old and currently
can I back up
projected.
really
Yeah.
quickly? James Conner is kind of who I hope Braelon Allen becomes in
Yes.
the
Yes.
NFL. I think Conner was more physical coming out of Pittsburgh, but that
Hmm.
type of running back where soft hands, improving as a pass catcher, downhill runner, like I don't think you have to squint very hard to see him being a James Conner level running back in the NFL.
I think that is, yeah, I really like that. Honestly, didn't even like cross my mind naming James Conner there, but like I could very well see that. And what you see from James Conner, actually 6'1", same height as Braylon Allen, 233 pounds, which
Very
is
similar.
just very similar build to what Braylon Allen cut to after playing at a much bigger weight. And maybe that does impact his overall explosiveness. Like sometimes that lack of ability to get that initial burst, maybe behind the line to scrimmage, maybe we do see some improvements if he's playing 15 pounds lighter than we saw him
I hope
play
so. I
at
hope that's what
Wisconsin.
happens.
I
I,
think that could very realistic outcome. But I'm going to be honest, like I'm looking at the number of running backs being drafted at Jalen Warren, 25-year-old, technically backup running back at Pitt or in Pittsburgh. Austin Eckler, Raheem Mostert being drafted one spot behind him at RB 39, 32-year-old Raheem Mostert. Even
oh,
Zach Moss being drafted, not even a full round behind Braylon Allen, 26 years old, who uh, I love as a player, but hasn't necessarily paid off for fantasy football. Like I'm taking
yeah.
Braylon Allen over any and all of these players. And I'm going to be honest, he's one of these guys that I think after several seasons of people being very excited after his freshman season, the lack of explosion at the end of his career, I think is going to make him one of the best values among all of the running backs in this dynasty class.
That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty Football your first listen every single day. On tomorrow's show, we're going to discuss Blake Corum, running back from Michigan, another really interesting running back prospect that is expected to go sometime on day 2 of the NFL draft. So make sure you check that out. Go download the Locked On Dynasty Football podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Go follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Majuk. I'm at Marcus_Mosher, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.